Hello everybody, it's me, Roku, back with some more League of Legends content. This video has been a long time coming because it is the Season 13 Darius guide. Yes, finally, let's just get right into it and talk about everything that you need to know to play Darius like a god. First things first, summoner spells, always flash and ghost, nothing to explain here. Just flash and ghost. Let's get into our runes real quick. For your primary tree, you almost always want Conqueror. There's no other tree you want other than Position and the Conqueror as the keystone because it works so well with Darius. You always want Triumph. It's just the best rune in the game for Darius, works so well with him. As for this row, you can always switch between Alacrity and Tenacity. Alacrity for most of your games, and Tenacity against high CC compositions. One thing to basically keep in mind is that while you're changing your runes, especially with the attack speed ones, Darius' attack speed is going to change, which means that your combos and etc. are going to be either more or less difficult to do depending on which runes you've taken. So just keep the ever-changing amount of attack speed that Darius can have because of his runes in mind so that you're used to it and you don't just miss your auto attacks in game. Last Stand is the best rune here, no question. And now we get into our secondary tree, which is where all the choices lie. The first viable path in your secondary tree is to go for sorcery in order to get access to Nimbus Cloak. Nimbus Cloak gives you a lot of move speed for every single one of your summoner spell uses, which is when Darius is at his strongest. So if you can make use of that move speed, Nimbus Cloak can get a lot of work done. There are a lot of situations where that extra bit of move speed along with your flash or your ghost can make or break the fight. The other rune that you take from this entire tree doesn't really matter because they all kind of suck on Darius, but the ones that suck the least is Celerity and Transcendence, right? Take either of the two based on your preference. I go for Celerity, but it really does not matter, right? Which, like, it's not that they're good, it's that they're the least bad ones, if you get what I'm saying. You should go for the Sorcery tree if you're basically like smurfing, you're confident that you're going to win lane, just you're getting into the game knowing that your mechanics are on point. The other viable secondary tree that you can go for is Resolve. The reason for this is that Resolve lets you better prepare for specific situations like lanes. First things first, you want either of these two runes because they give you a lot of laning power. Bone Plating is great against champions who like to go in and hit you a few times before disengaging, like your Sets, your Jaxes, and etc. And Second Wind is more for champions that tend to outrange you, so like an Aatrox or like a ranged champion. You almost always want either of these two. And then for your secondary pick, you can go for a variety of things. You can go for Demolisher if you know you're going to win lane, you want to just snowball really hard. You can go Unflinching, which comes with a lot of CC and crucially a lot of slows because it gives you more slows as well. Revitalize is great to help buff up your Q healing, your Sterix shield, and other healing from any other source. Overgrowth is a decent source of HP, and that's pretty much it for the Resolve tree. Now, normally, you want to pick one thing from here, and one thing from down here for a nice, safe little tree that'll help you more consistently win lane. But you can pick and choose based on what you want to do for that specific game. As for the little stats right here, you always want to pick the attack speed and also this AD. The only thing you should be changing from game to game to game are these three things right here. Picking for one of these defensive stats. Health, if the lane is free, basically it's already won. Armor versus AD opponents, and magic resist versus AP opponents. The reason we go HP when the lane is already won is simply because if you see, the HP scales based on the game, whereas the resistances do not. This basically means that if the lane is free, you're going to get more gold value of stats from your runes by picking the health. The health is more valuable in terms of gold overall because at some point, I'd say like level 6 or 7, or at that point, the health becomes more valuable than either of these two. But these two do way more earlier on in lane. So if you gotta like get into an early lane fight to win the lane, then go for the resistances. If you already win the lane, like it's a tank matchup or whatever, then going for the health is the better option. One thing you want to keep in mind is that you basically want this rune page to be open before every single match. Wait for opponents to pick their champions, and then adjust your runes depending on who you're up against. Never take one rune page into every single match. You should always be changing it and adapting it to the match in hand. Alright, the part that probably everybody's been waiting for, the items. We're going to talk about every single item, how good it is, and which builds are the best to build for Darius in Season 13. Now, if this video hits 800 likes, I will release this entire item set in the description and the comments so you can have this exact thing in game and also in your client. So yeah, let's just get right into it. First off, we have our starting items right here. We have D-Blade and D-Shield. Pretty standard. Go D-Blade if you're going to be up against a matchup that you're going to fight a lot. If you're going for early all-ins. D-Shield if you want to be a bit more safe. You're going to take a lot of poke in the matchup. If you're not planning on being too aggressive earlier on. The thing is, D-Blade works great against some matchups and sucks against some matchups. Whereas D-Shield is okay versus all matchups. So if you're not sure, just go for D-Shield. Always remember to buy your wards, and also instead of buying potions constantly, just buy refill pot. I see a lot of players do this, and it's just an unnecessary waste of gold. The next section is epic items to rush. These are items you want to rush in your first back or your second back to really help your laning process. The first items are just the items you build when you want to rush your mythics. So this is for Stridebreaker, these three are for Triforce. We have our boots choice right here. Merc choice versus a lot of CC, versus some AP in lane. Ninja Tabis, or plated steel caps, versus all attack damage and versus AD in general. One thing that is really crucial to understand is that Mercury Treads are bought for their tenacity, not the magic resist. What I mean by this is that if you're up against a matchup that does a ton of magic damage like an Akali or something, then Merc Treads is not going to be useful because she has no CC. You're better off going for a Negatron Cloak, because this item gives you a 50 magic resist for less money, okay? So if you're going to buy Merc Treads earlier on, just think about who you're up against, okay? Because Merc Treads is mainly bought against matches that you got a lot of annoying CC to deal with, or even teams where the enemy jungler has a lot of annoying CC. Just build it for whatever you need. Execution's Calling is for anti-heal. Q says against your, suppression champions like your Malzahars, your Mordekaisers, etc. Warder's Mail is the best substitute for plated steel caps if you can't buy it. If you're ever in a situation where you need damage resistance against auto attacks and also tenacity, you can go for Merc Treads for tenacity and Warden's Mail for auto attacks because it is basically a substitute for plated steel caps. Bramble Vest is basically just the same anti-heal thing, but you're buying against champions that like to auto attack you, like to do 80 damage. And Spectre's Call is basically what you buy if you're in a very heavy poke matchup that does AP damage. So you're looking at your Teemo matchups, your Cassiopeia matches, you buy this, and as long as you don't go for big all-ins, you should be able to sustain back from any certain damage that they deal to you. Let's get real quick into all the usable mythics. These are the mythic items that are the best for Darius that you want to be building most of the time. First things first, Triforce. This is the best mythic item for Darius by far. The stats are great, the mythic passive is great, and the way it works is even more amazing. Basically speaking, Triforce turns your base stats into damage. With Darius having a lot of base stats, Triforce essentially scales with you, so that no matter what point you are at in the game, you have a lot of damage to work with. So if you do get into matches where the enemy has way too much tankiness for you to just stomp out, Triforce is going to help you fix that problem because it will give you a ton of damage. And if you're super fed, Triforce can help you one-shot squishies in just a single combo. Like, you can pick up a Nami or something, auto, W, Q, and then just ult kill them. And that will be enough to just completely one-shot them. So Triforce is an amazing item, and you should be building it in 90% of your matches, especially if you get fed. Up next, we got Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker is a bit more of a complex item as opposed to Triforce, but it's still very, very useful. So the thing that Stridebreaker offers that is obvious is the slow. This slow can be very, very useful if you're up against a very mobile team. There's a lot of move speed, there's a lot of dashes, and what Stridebreaker can do is that if somebody ever gets in your range, whether that be by a hook or you're just walking into them, you can use the slow to make sure that they don't get away in like the duration it takes for you to get your 5 stacks or whatnot. Stridebreaker is also very, very crucial in 1v1s because if you're up against a very jumpy champion or a champion that you need to kite or hold in place while you get your abilities back, then Stridebreaker is going to get a lot of work done. So if that Fiora goes in, you can use Stridebreaker to make sure that she can't get the rest of her vitals and you can basically outmaneuver her. Things like that. Also, because of the mythic passive, Stridebreaker is the go-to choice for a move speed focused build. Gore Drinker is an amazing mythic to get if you're up against a full melee team. Because the entire enemy team operates within your range already, what you can do with Gore Drinker is get multiple applications of Thirsting Slash, giving you a very meaty heal. This heal can be very crucial because if said melee team has a lot of damage, that extra active health can basically mean the difference between you getting 5 stacks and killing everyone, and you dying and being killed in the middle of your ult animation, for example. You shouldn't really be building Gore Drinker in other circumstances, but against melee teams, against teams that you want to basically just fight with all the time, Gore Drinker can get a lot of work done. Jackshire the Protein is the single best tank mythic introduced in Season 13. The item gives you a ton of stats to work with. It makes you really, really tanky just on its own. Now, the tooltip description that you see in the screen right now is not updated. They've buffed the amount from 2 armor MR to 3, from 10% extra to 15, but, why digress? It functionally does the same exact thing, except the numbers are a bit different in the live version. Jack showed the protein is amazing on Darius because if you already have a legendary mythic and you're already winning lane, you can pick this item up to make you even more tankier and make you practically unkillable for the next basically 5-10 minutes, as long as you don't grief it and die. Now, the heal is quite pathetic, and even though it's a tank item, you still cannot frontline with it as Darius because you'll just get blown up since Darius has no tank mechanics, but it's still an amazing item for a certain type of playstyle. Let's get through the usable legendary items. These are the legendaries I want to build on Darius. I'm not going to go through every one of them, talking about their specific use case. First off, Sterax. You basically want Sterax almost every single match for Darius because of how well it works with him. You get a ton of AD because of how much base AD Darius has, and that shield, ever since it's been buffed, is pretty massive. As an added bonus, the base AD that you get from Triforce 3 Full Strike bleeds into Sterax, so you get even more AD from the claws that catch. So yeah, build Sterax almost every game with or without Triforce, but yeah, let's get right into the next items. Death Stance. Death Stance is an amazing item on Darius. If you're guaranteed to get kills in fights, meaning that you're so fed that you'll get kills no matter what, then you gotta build Death Stance because it is an amazing item to help you crush a fight single-handedly. Up next, we got Dead Man's Plate. This is an amazing item for Darius because of the move speed it provides him with. If you're in a match, we're going to get out of the map really quickly. If you basically want to side lane and team fight at the same time, if you're fed enough already and just want to participate in the game more, the Dead Man's Plate is your go-to. Force of Nature is our premier anti-mage item. This item destroys magic damage. So if you're up against a very heavy source of AP DPS, then go for Force of Nature. It also gives you that massive move speed buff that can be quite clutch in a lot of fights. The new Randuin's Omen is amazing. If you're up against a major source of crit damage, you have to get this item. And because there's so many crit users in the game, you're basically not going to run into a match where Randuin's is useless. Great item. Build it very often. Spirit Visage is great because it works so well with the rest of your kit. You get more Q healing, you get more Triumph healing, more Sterax shield, more Death Stance healing, etc, etc, etc. So if you're in a position where the enemy has AP damage, but they're not exactly one-shotting you, the Spirit Visage is enough, and as an added bonus, you get a ton more healing and shielding. Also, if you have a healer on your team, like a Yuumi or a Soraka or something, the Spirit Visage is going to be amazing. Thornmail. Thornmail is a great item because it's got decent stats, and it's got good Grievous Wounds, but keep in mind that Darius is not the best applier of the 40% Grievous Wounds because that is only going to apply on the targets that Darius hooks. So you only have one ability to proc Thorns on other champions. So keep this in mind if you're buying anti-heal because the Kempang Chainsword is a better source of anti-heal for Darius. Gargoyle Stoneplate is an amazing item on Darius. The only issue it has is that its price tag is way too massive. It gives you a ton of stats, and it gives you an active shield that you can use whenever you're taking a ton of damage. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of players misuse the active. They just press it, like in positions where they're not going to take damage, in positions where they already have Sterax shield, so it's like 2 shields being wasted at once, so don't do that. You basically want to use Gargoyle Stoneplate with the enemy's damage. So if someone's shooting some sort of massive ability at you, like a Vanguard ult or something else, then you want to use your Gargoyle Stoneplate. Otherwise, if you don't know how to properly use this item, you're better off just not building because it does take a bit of skill and perceptiveness to use properly. Antithemis Chains is a very good item. It's great stats for a very cheap price. And also, the damage reduction against this one target can be quite clutch. So if the enemy team is kind of built around one champion, they can build out Antithemis Chains and basically, put the active on them to take less damage from them. And as an added bonus, your CC lasts longer against them, so there's that to consider as well. Now, there's a cheese you can do where if you're losing a lane pretty hard, you could go Antithemis Chains first item and then basically win the fight because they do less damage to you, but this is super cheese, and I would not recommend it. I would just recommend playing better, so yeah. Frozen Heart is an amazing anti-AD damage item. It gives you a lot of armor. It reduces people's attack speed, which is more destructive than you think. So you get a lot of work done with this item. It's also quite cheap, meaning that if you need an armor option ASAP, then you can go for Frozen Heart. And also it builds out of Warden's Mail, which gives it one of the best build paths in the game for an armor item. I would be very careful about building this item against AP teams, because basically speaking, against AP damage, Frozen Heart is practically completely useless. With armor items, at least the health is useful against other types of damage, but with this item, no. So I would only build Frozen Heart against very hard AD compositions. Turbo Chem Tank is not the best item for Darius, but it is quite usable. It's essentially what the old Righteous Glory used to be. The one thing that holds this item back is the magic resist, meaning that you can only build it against AP damage, but the active of it is quite useful in certain situations. You basically buy this item when you're up against teams where you want to act as like a pseudo assassin, if that makes sense, like a Garen, you know? You're basically like operating out of their jungle, you're putting wards down, you're waiting for people to cross, and you just run up on them and kill them. This is the kind of playstyle that Turbo Chem Tank works best in, and it's also great in basically games where you want to act as like an engage, so you want to get into a good flank, and then Turbo Chem Tank run into the enemy and get a massive hook that team can just wipe the enemy team off of using. Now, this isn't quite the consistent playstyle, and I wouldn't suggest going Turbo Chem Tank over the other items like Demands Plate or Force of Nature, but it's still a great item to consider if you need it. Cleaver is a great item to substitute a Mythic, so if you're planning on going Jack Shield and Protein, rush Cleaver first item. You can do the same with Ravenous Hydra because it is such a massively snowballing item. If you're snowballing greatly and you're planning on going Jack Shield and Protein, then instead of Cleaver, you can always go for Ravenous Hydra. It's an amazing item that gives you a ton of damage. Spirit Shojin is a very expensive item and it gives you a lot to work with. Basically speaking, if you're running a move speed focused build, the Spirit Shojin is quite clutch, but in other builds, it kind of suffers in its usefulness because when you put it up against items like Sterak's Gauge or Death Dance, it really suffers because it's just worse than them because those items synergize better with Darius. But if you're building a build that focuses on move speed above all, then Spirit Surgeon can be a very big use because of how much boost it provides you when you're low health. Serpent's Fang is not the best item to build on Darius, it's not good at all, but sometimes you're the only person that can apply the anti-shield effect, so you would have no choice but to build this item. Now, a life hack that I've discovered is building Serpent's Fang along with Bramble Vest. Bramble Vest does damage, right? So if you build Serpent's Fang and ADC auto attacks you, then they get the Serpent's Fang like shield reaver effect on them because of the damage that Bramble Vest does to them. So this is quite a clutch life hack. I've discovered it and it is amazing. So give it a try when you're in that specific situation where the enemy has a lot of annoying shields. Up next, we got Silverblade Dawn. This is basically the bruiser item you get if you need QSS. Chembug Chainsword is the best anti-heal option. If you need anti-heal and you need stat, then this is the best way to go about it. It also activates the stronger Grievous Wounds when the target is already close to dying. So you're literally looking at an item that functions on its own as long as you apply a bleed stack on the target. Metamorphosis is not that great, but think of it as like a Sterax against full AP teams. If you're not against a team that is, I stress this, full AP, then don't get Maw. It is terrible compared to the other items. Now that we're done with all the items, let's get into our example builds. Here's an example Fed carry build, Tri-Gauge into full tank, Shield Max build, build against full AD, build against full AP, move speed focus build, and then we got two Jackshow builds right here with a Jackshow tank build and a Jackshow Ravenous Fed risky, 4-farm build. Now there are two paths that you can go for here, which is the old path, where we basically use the builds that were already there from the last season, and the second path, which is the season 13 build. Now I hate to say this, but the season 13 items are honestly quite unnecessary. For 90-95% of your games, you're better off just going for the builds with the items that you already had in Season 12, and you'll basically rarely run into matches where you're losing, but you would have won had you built the newer items. These builds are just here for you to opt for when you really want that kind of playstyle where you want to be more of a meaty frontliner or where you're having fun with your friends and want to just one-shot everybody with still a build that is kind of viable. If you don't want to think too hard about it, just go for the builds that we already had in Season 12. And also, these builds are examples. You don't want to go for them one for one. Like, let's say you want to go for the Fed carry build, but you're up against a very heavy auto-attacking team. Then you might want to swap out your Merc Treads for a Ninja Tabi. Or if you're up against a team that has a lot of heavy AP damage, then swap out Spirit Message for a Force of Nature. Maybe you might need to replace Triforce with your Strikebreaker, who knows, okay? Don't copy these one-to-one. Think about what each item does and about whether that item will be best for your current match at hand. Alright, that's pretty much it for the Season 13 Darius guide. In the coming weeks, I will be creating a combo guide, a matchup guide, and also a bunch of gameplay guides for you guys to see how to play Darius exactly in the new season. If you want to see those videos, please subscribe to the channel. Anyway, that's it for the video. Bye.